And welcome, one and all. This is Kevin, your Apptrepreneur. Thank you for watching us. Well, thank you for joining us, I should say, on the Apptrepreneur show. And you might notice something a little different today. A certain trademark piece of clothing not around. Well, there is a reason for that. You see, California is going through an insane heat wave right now. And even though I have worn the beanie during times of heat, during times of cold, today it's just way too sticky for me to even consider doing it. And it's too hot to even consider turning off the AC. So if you hear that in the background, that's what it is. So anyway, welcome Kevin Joseph. What another Kevin. Always nice to see Kevin's here. So that's what's going on right now. You know, who knows? Maybe it'll grow. Maybe it'll never come back. No, of course it will come back. It was just way too hot today. So anyway, folks, we are returning to the Apptrepreneur show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday scheduling. Monday we took a day off. But today we have got a few big topics and a lot of discussion. And please feel free to join us. Feel free to chat in the live chat and all that jazz. But the first thing we're going to discuss is the first topic's really a couple topics in one. It's Trip Technologies. As you know, we had Bob McNulty, the CEO of Trip, on the channel on Friday in an interview, which was a little divisive, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But one of the things he said was that Tripdelivers was actually going to be launching this week. Now, I asked him if that was actually going to be true, and, well, we have confirmation. Tripdelivers has actually launched in 36 markets. Even Baton Rouge, which is where 225 magazine actually picked up the story. And it reads like a normal press release. A Las Vegas-based company is launching a new restaurant delivery service in Baton Rouge, marking the latest development in the increasingly competitive delivery landscape. Trip Technologies launched its app Tripdelivers on Apple's App Store on Thursday for 36 markets across the country, including Baton Rouge and New Orleans. The service, similar to Louisiana basin-bred Waiter, differs from other delivery services in that the independent driver-owned operators earn 100% of the ride fare, which includes time and distance, wait time, and cancellation fee, in addition to 100% of the tip. Aiming to increase fair transparency between drivers and customers, the company provides identical receipts to both parties. Pro drivers pay $99.99 monthly for unlimited rides and deliveries, while side hustle drivers pay $39.99 monthly for up to 75 orders. So basically, the $100 one is the way to go for almost everyone. The company also has a no menu markup policy for both the restaurant partners and customers. While the app's user interface did not show any Baton Rouge area partner restaurants of this morning, Tripdelivers' website shows that dozens of local drivers have signed up to deliver food through the service. Well, of course, drivers have been signing up. Can you get the restaurants to sign up? The service joins Waiter, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and DoorDash as competitors in the Baton Rouge market. Now, like I said, this is a local online website, and they are reporting that, hey, the app has launched, but interestingly, they opened the app and they don't really see any Baton Rouge area partner restaurants, which leads me to believe there's nothing really to buy right now. And we'll have to see exactly what happens. I mean, it is on the store, it absolutely is, but will it actually go anywhere? I guess we're going to have to see. But with that said, let's discuss the interview that I did with Bob McNulty on Friday. Because there was a lot of people that had a lot of things to say about it, and that's fine. Interviews are kind of a tricky thing on these channels. I mean, I think when people watch interviews, they all want to know certain things, and they also want to see certain questions get asked and see certain things happen. If everyone's lucky, the person being interviewed has a complete meltdown and it makes for great theatrics. But that's not what most interviews are. Most interviews are simply two people sitting in a room, or in this case over Zoom, with one asking questions and the other answering. And that's what I did. Now, some people felt I didn't ask as much questions as I could have, like certain sensitive questions. I acknowledge, of course, there were always more sensitive questions I could have asked. There always is. But if people were tuning in expecting me to basically open up the interview saying, "So, Mr. McNulty, first question, can you please answer why it is you're a giant dickwad to everyone?" I was never going to do that. It was always going to be cordial. And yes, some of the questions were not necessarily going to be hard-hitting. But here's the thing. I did ask some tough questions. I did ask about drivers who had paid money and not, gotten refunds. I did ask if he was aware that the SEC was officially investigating Trip. I asked about the stock compensation. I actually pressed him quite a bit on that one. And I pressed him on what seems to be a very bad background check when it came to Taha Abbasi, because if Taha was so bad, why did the background check not catch those things? Now, here's the thing. Once he answers, I could ask a follow-up question if I'm not entirely happy, but for the most part, that's the answer. I don't know what people want me to do. They want me to say, "You are a liar." I can't always definitively prove that. So, no, I asked the question. He's going to answer it however he wants, and those were the answers he gave. The other reality, of course, is that when you watch interviews on 60 Minutes, 2020, you might notice there's a lot of cuts in those interviews. That's because most interviews are pretty dry. They will bring someone into the room, they'll talk to them for an hour or two, and then they'll usually use 15 minutes of the interview. They want the juicy parts. This was a live stream. We weren't going to do that. And again, I did not set out to make the interview scandalous by any means. I set out to ask questions, and he gave me answers. Now, looking in the comment section, based on those answers, some people actually said they trust Trip a lot less now that this answer has been given. You know what? That's fine. And some people say they trust Trip more based on those answers. That is perfectly fine. You can take whatever you want from the interview. I was not... The whole point wasn't to espouse a certain point of view. Some say I should not be giving him the time of the day and that they lost respect for me. Hey, you know what? I'm going to talk to anyone I want to on. It's my channel. And if I feel it's relevant to talk to that person, we're going to talk to that person. So thank you all for watching the interview, and even if I disagree with some of the comments, thank you for leaving them. But I just want to clarify what interviews are really like. And I will say, with my head held high, that unlike other interviews that happened last week, which will remain nameless, I at least asked a few tough questions, whereas in other said interviews, tough questions were never asked. So anyway, I just wanted to say that about the Trip interview, and just tie that in with the fact that Tripdelivers appears to be live for whatever the heck that is worth to people. Tripdelivers is live, and I would like to know what you think about all of that. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. All right, and with that out of the way, let's get on to main topic number 2. And the second main topic involves Uber and Lyft, because here's the thing. Depending on when you're watching this, if you're watching this live, Uber and Lyft might actually be shutting down tonight. They might be shutting down tonight. In fact, they've even been sending ominous messages to riders in California ahead of the possible shutdown. I actually got this message on my phone last night. It was like, hey, Rideshare may go away in California. And of course, they use it as a, to threaten, like, we might have to take down the rideshare service because of a judge order. Please vote yes on Prop 22 this election. Uber is definitely going to be doing what they can to get people to vote on this. And Dara Khosrowshahi was on another podcast talking about a couple things. One, that they might be moving Uber to a franchise model, which that would definitely be interesting, and that they can't just go out and hire 50,000 people overnight. Of course, that ignores the fact that they knew this was potentially coming for years, and they should have had a plan B, and in fact, they probably do have a plan B. They are just, exercising their options to leave California just to show that they can do it. And of course, some people don't think that's a very good idea. Now, if you're watching this on the 20th as a replay, then guess what? They might actually already be shut down. And in that case, the question might arise for a lot of people who are not only drivers, but even riders. What do I do now if Uber and Lyft are not in California? Who's going to take those places? And interestingly, we have some competitors who are just waiting for them to leave, or they are prepared to pounce, if you will. Interestingly, Trip is not one of those people. But let's go down and let's look at some. By the way, for those who want to know, this is what the warning looked like. This is what I got last night. This is probably what a lot of you are going to get. But let's look at some of the companies that are preparing to swoop in and take your money if Uber and Lyft decide to actually cut the cord, or pull the plug, I should say, on California. And there's at least two companies. The first one is Alto, a Texas-based rideshare service who had planned to expand to California by early 2021. CEO Will Coleman said Alto now hopes to be there no later than early November. So that one's going to take a little while, but Alto might be the first company to come to California if Uber and Lyft shall leave. Alto has had an employee-based driver model since its inception, lowering the regulatory hurdles it will have to jump to get set up in California. Coleman said the model allows Alto to better control the rider experience, which is especially important for cleaning procedures related to COVID-19. And he's quoted as saying, "The reality is that having W-2 workers is actually significantly more innovative than having contractors in the transportation space. Fundamentally, what we can control is actually the most important part of our business, which is supply. The challenge that Uber and Lyft have with independent contractors is that they have zero control over their supply," which, a lot of drivers might be looking at saying, well, I don't care about control. Again, this is one company. And of course, he highlights that, they're not going to be as quick as Uber and Lyft. In fact, they tell their customers, look, expect us there in 10 minutes no matter what. But that apparently they deliver on that promise 99% of the time. Now, another startup, and this one might sound familiar, is Arcade City. And for those of you who might remember if you're going like, man, Arcade City, that sounds familiar, it's because Arcade City was a rideshare company that when Uber and Lyft left Texas, one of the cities in Texas, they swooped in and filled that need. And it looks like, Austin. It looks like they are going to continue that. They were born out of a Facebook group, and their founder, Christopher David, said he's preparing to sign up drivers in California with a new app. The service doesn't yet collect fees from riders or drivers, but David said he anticipates making money down the road by offering services like credit card payment processing, to those who use the service. He also said he wouldn't shy away from using some of Uber and Lyft's early tactics to enter a new market if regulation doesn't keep up with new models of transportation. Well, regulation is catching up, and that's why Uber and Lyft are leaving. And he does say that Arcade City aims to value drivers more than he believes those businesses have demonstrated, which is the rideshare industry altogether. Now, there's another ride-hailing service called Wings that already operates in San Francisco and is working on converting its drivers to employees. CEO Christoph Bombach sees it as an opportunity to discover if employment-based driving gives the company more control over its standards, especially with the new demands of COVID-19, which requires additional cleaning and protocols for drivers. As he says, all these things really point towards having more of a relationship, which is more of an employee-employer relationship. Because if you work in an independent contractor model, that's just a number of things that you're not supposed to do. Really clearly directing the driver of what to do, or even providing PPE to be able to protect them, is typically something you wouldn't be doing in an independent contractor relationship. Bombach plans to use the San Francisco market as the first to test the employee model before possibly expanding it to cities in other states in which Wings operates, even if they don't mandate employee classification. And then, of course, you have taxis. Now, a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers who are watching this, and I'm not looking at the comments bar now, but I fully anticipate a lot of them like, I don't want to be an employee. I want to stay an independent contractor. You know what? Hey, if that's what you want, then yeah, maybe these services are not for you. But here's the bottom line. You're gonna be an employee, or you're not gonna do this at this point. I mean, maybe 22 will pass, maybe Uber and Lyft will win in court, they certainly have before, but the courts have basically stated that what Uber and Lyft are doing amounts to you being an employee, and that's why they ruled against them. Now, Uber and Lyft, again, can actually make changes and keep you independent contractors. They don't want to do that. They want to keep controlling you while asserting that you are your own boss, and that's not how it works. At least that's not how it should work. And I know that for some people this works. Some people, they make a little bit of money, and this works out hunky-dory for them. But here's the reality of the situation as far as I see it. The situation is far worse in grander scale for more people. The vast majority of people do not benefit from this system. And this system is very predatory. In fact, it's interesting because when it was first announced that Uber and Lyft might be leaving California, some of my buddies, Dark Road Run, Uberman Tampa, Rideshare Trickster, and the Driver Sensei all had like a little 3-hour live stream where they discussed this. A very good discussion, by the way, and I even popped in for like a few minutes. And one of the things that Driver Sensei told me was when I said, this is really not something we should be encouraging. He's like, look, why do people do it? For the money. They say that, I can't do his voice very well, I'm just not as energetic. That would you do it for yourself? Maybe not. Would you do it so your wife doesn't starve? Well, maybe. Would you do it so your kids wouldn't starve? And that's why they do it. They're desperate. And my whole thing is you should never do something that is desperate. When people are desperate, they tend to make very bad deals and tend to get themselves in situations that they find really difficult to get out of later, that might do them more harm in the long run than the short run. And if we acknowledge that there's something that's taking advantage of desperate people, we need to fix that. So even if a few people are okay with this, I think the system is rotten to the core. I think it has taken advantage of far more people than it has helped. I'm actually personally ashamed that I ever encouraged people to sign up for it. Granted, when they were signing up for it, it was good, and chances are most of those people got out of it after so many rides. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens when these companies come in. Who knows? Maybe the employer-employer model will work better for a lot of people. Who knows? I might even go back to it. You never know what's going to happen. But bottom line is, it'll be very interesting to see if Uber actually shuts down the service. I was considering doing like a live stream party tonight. That's kind of like, an Uber shutdown party. But I probably won't, because I have something to do very early tomorrow morning, and I shouldn't be staying up till midnight. Anyway, I would like to know what you think of this. Of course, people have strong opinions of it. As long as you flame responsibly, that's great. But leave them below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, as I said before, flame responsibly. Have a good one. All right, so let's see. What are some of the comments here? So, let's see here. Samantha said 10 minutes is a long time. We waited 30 minutes before. No, I know, it's not a long time, but people, they're used to... Hey, you know what? Even when I was doing Uber, there were situations where I would accept a ride, and it would be in the other direction. I just had to go to the light and turn around, and 20 seconds later, they canceled the ride because they saw I was driving a different direction. People are just impatient. What can I say? Oh, hey, Ryan's here. Kevin says the CEO didn't even acknowledge us in the group chat. Well, Kevin, in all fairness, Bob McNulty couldn't see the chat. Only I could. And I had made the rules very clear a couple times. If you really had a question that you absolutely wanted to have answered during that interview, send a super chat, because we did not have time to go through all those questions. We stated that a few times. Nobody dropped $1. So therefore, none of the questions got answered. Now, I know some people might be saying, well, you shouldn't be charging for questions to be answered. It's like, well, first of all, it's my channel. I can do what I want. Secondly, a lot of YouTube channels actually do this. It's like, hey, you know what? The people who pay the money, we read their messages on the internet, and that's that. Now, we are thankfully not at the point where I have to do that yet, but during that live stream, hey, I was going to be busy for almost an hour talking to him. I would not have time to constantly check the chat, so I made it a point a few times, if there's a question you really want to have answered, send a super chat. It doesn't even have to be much. It can just be $1, just so that I know this is really important to you. Nobody did that, so therefore, nothing got answered. But in his defense, so anyway. Let's see here. Kevin also said, riders can schedule a ride to reduce wait times. Yes, they can do that too. And A has said, Dara's a joke. Don't even know which hole crawled out of. Expedia. They did. And Kevin says, Uber and Lyft have exploited people for way too long. Enough is enough. I agree. He also says he should make time to present himself to his future workforce. I agree he should, and that's his decision to do or not to do. The 12020 says, your channel, your rules, nice answer. I like, yeah, well, I've been doing this long enough to not, to basically be, when people say like, hey, you got to do this, or I'm going to like either unsubscribe, or I'm going to give a thumbs down, or I'm going to do this. Like, I'm at the point where it's like, don't care. Do what you want. It's my channel. Kevin says he could make a YouTube channel and go live like you and answer drivers' questions. It's not that hard. You're right. He could. And I would encourage him to do things like that. But ultimately, that's his decision. All right, then. I'm actually going to switch the topics around because I've only got 3 topics today. And I think the second one's definitely a button pusher, so we're going to save that one for last. But the main topic number 3 involves movie theaters. And movie theaters are actually going to be opening, or at least they're going to start to open in 2 days. Not in every state, but in a good portion of the states. Now, 2 of the movie theaters' biggest markets, LA and New York City, will not be open because we're still under lockdown. Thank you, all the spring breakers, protesters, churchgoers, everyone who didn't, anti-maskers, everyone who did not practice common sense social distancing and mask wearing. Because of you, I'm not going to get to see Tenet, but whatever. So, Andrew Cuomo who was the governor of New York, started opening a lot of businesses. And he was asked about movie theaters. And he gave a very blunt, but I think very misguided answer, that your movie theaters aren't worth it. And we're going to read exactly what he says. I'm going to try to do my best Cuomo impression. But needless to say, while I would normally agree under some circumstances, I don't in this circumstance. So here's what he's saying. It's the level of risk. If you look at our metrics, we started with the most essential business that posed the least risk. And then it was the graduation to the latest essential business that proposed the most risk. I'm sure there's a whole group of people who say, I cannot live without going to the movies. But on a relative risk scale, a movie theater is less essential and poses a high risk. It is congregate. It is one ventilation system. You are seated there for a long period of time. Even if you are at 50% capacity with 1 or 2 seats between the 2 of you, this is a risk situation, and movie theaters are not that high on the list of essentials. And he did not, of course, indicate when the movie theaters would open. Now, here's the thing. I normally would agree with this, believe it or not. Movie theaters are, in many ways, not essential. They are just something fun to do. It is a congregate area. There are risks. Here's where I got a little annoyed. Because Cuomo, on the same day or even the day before, announced that gyms would be opening. Gyms are probably the one of the highest risk places to go during a pandemic, that and a bar, because bars tend to be small. Gyms have, what do people do there? They sweat, they breathe heavily, they fling their droplets across the room, they're touching everything, they're sweating over everything, they're moving around. And here's the other thing about gyms. Gyms are the one place where you really cannot require people to wear a mask. And you cannot do so because the mask is interfering with your breathing. And joggers who have worn masks have actually had heart attacks or collapsed lungs because they're not getting the oxygen circulated the way they need to. So why he's saying that you can open a gym, which is more of a risk than movie theaters, where people are generally sitting down, not moving around. Hopefully they're wearing a mask for the most part. And even with Texas Alamo Drafthouse, they're doing like an additional thing where it's like they're telling people to remain seated at the end of the movie, and they will, one row at a time, let people exit. That sounds a lot safe, like less risky than a gym. Now, what about essential? Well, okay, movie theaters might not be essential, but you want to know what else Governor Cuomo opened during this discussion? He opened bowling alleys. Bowling alleys. Now look, I know that you can social distance a little at the bowling alley. Every other lane can probably be blocked out, and people can be distanced fairly fine there. But here's the thing. First of all, sweating again. Some people sweat when they bowl, but here's the other thing. Don't tell me a bowling alley is more essential than a movie theater. It's not. It's just as, if not less essential than a movie theater. I'm sorry, it just is. And you know what's really concerning me right now is the lack of consistency. Because once you start getting to the point where you're inconsistent, you get to the point where people start questioning everything. New York's going to have like a miserable time because what it looks like right now is that Governor Cuomo is prioritizing certain businesses over others, even if they are more dangerous or less essential than businesses that he's asking to stay closed. In California, we have this mega church run by a guy named John MacArthur. And he was taken to court recently because he decided he was going to defy mask and social distance orders. That, well, here's the thing. He was going to hold a service. Over 1,000 people showed up, congregated in a building, and nobody wore masks, or very, very, very few people wore masks. And MacArthur said that God will put his dome around the people, and they will protect them from COVID-19. Well, look, God might do that, but God might also let you all catch it to teach you a lesson against listening to the doctors. Well, for some reason, the judge in the case decided to let John MacArthur hold his church. And he was going to be able to hold church services from now on without social distancing and without mask wearing. And you know what? Every restaurant, bar, theater, and Disney deserves to go to California and say, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Why do we have to follow these rules but not them? Why do we have to follow these rules but not them? Nevada had a similar situation. The Nevada government decided, hey, you know what? Casinos can increase the number of patrons in their buildings, but churches, regardless of size, had to stay limited to 50. Even if it was like a mega church and you could put 300 people in there and everyone would be spread out. But I'm worried a little bit about this. This inconsistency is scary. We've been dealing with this long enough. You would think that the science would show not only what is and isn't more essential and what is and isn't more dangerous, but we've been dealing with this long enough that most of these things, with, I would argue, the exception of gyms and small enclosed bars, you would think that they would have guidelines on what you could do. Hey, like with churches, hey, if you're going to be inside a building, This is how many people you must have, no singing, yada yada. If you're outside, you can have this many people, you can do singing with a mask on. Like, why don't you have consistent guidelines? Why don't we have guidelines that are set up already? Like, at this point, it's and Cuomo, who I have largely liked during all of this. I actually feel that we would be dealing with this pandemic a lot better if he was our president right now instead of who's currently in office. And yet, his attack on movie theaters is not only not justified, his lenience on other businesses is so random and so ill-considered that it makes me look at this guy who seems to have been on top of the situation and say, I think you're just making it up. Not the virus, of course, but I think you're just making this up as you go along. Like, for whatever reasons, you have something against movie theaters right now. Maybe it's because you saw virus in the 90s. I don't know. But movie theaters are of no more inherent danger than a bowling alley, and it's especially less dangerous than a gym, where, again, you're sweating, breathing heavily, throwing droplets of your sweat around, moving around constantly. And yet, movie theaters in New York, and they could really use the money right now, are told they have to stay closed, and they are not even given a time frame from which to open. Now, some of you might be saying, like, why am I so upset about this? I'm not in New York. I mean, California might not do that. It's because I'm concerned that California will do this. Like, what if California decides, hey, you know what? Every business, like, we can start going to sports stadiums, we can start going to gyms, we can start going to crowded bars, but we can't go to movie theaters. I mean, at one point, and then they're not offering any assistance to the movie theaters, and I'm concerned about the movie theaters. I think that given a chance they will come back, but I don't want to see them arbitrarily closed when they don't have to be. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on this. What do you think about this? Do you think Cuomo is right about the movie theaters, or do you think he is wrong about the movie theaters? I would love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. As always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. All right, let's see some of these questions. So let's see here. Martin says, if you look at the history of the taxi business, it's about cars that couldn't be sold. So someone came up with the idea of putting meters in the cars to get them in use. Yes, exactly. Yeah, public transportation and casinos are open, but movie theaters got to be closed. I don't know. So SM says, wow. Kevin says, if people can loot and peaceful protest, then people should be allowed to go to church. Well, no, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. Some people are not condemning that for, I believe, political reasons. But I want consistency. And by the way, that's one of the inconsistent things, like how, hey, you can't... I'm just going to say it now. Now, it's not... I know why we were upset and why the protest happened. And clearly what happened to George Floyd was horrible. But I'm getting a little tired of people saying that we had a second spike. Not because of the protests. It was because we flooded the beaches. We went to bars. We didn't wear masks. Our president wouldn't wear a mask. Bad leadership. It was every reason we spiked except the protests, which showed up 2 weeks before the second spike, much like the science said it would. So, yeah. There you go. And Kevin says, if Cuomo was president, you'd be taxed up the rear, and man, he gets off on taxing people. Well, unfortunately, we're going to get taxed. We're all going to be taxed very heavily soon because of all the stimulus packages. Like, we have to pay that back at some point. All right. With that out of the way, let's move on to our final main topic. And this one's going to be a very, 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 very touchy one. But I kind of feel like I want to talk about it. And hey, again, it's my channel. I can talk about whatever I want, I suppose. So, Disney World is reopened. And for the record, I don't think theme parks should be reopening just yet. I think theme parks, like gyms, should probably wait quite a bit longer, because those are just germ factories, the theme parks. And especially Disney. I mean, Disney's probably done as good a job as you can expect, keeping the place clean. But the bottom line is you still have guests who don't want to wear the masks, who want to lick everything. Like, in fact, there was a Disney vlogger who went back on day one and admitted she had a fever and a sore throat. And it's like, why are you going to Disneyland then? Or Disney World? Why are you doing it? The problem isn't the companies. It's always going to be the people, the customers, the guests, whatever you want to call them. Well, one family that had months ago saved up money and bought a vacation to go to Disney World. And they were, at first, by the way, a little concerned that their trip might be canceled because of this whole COVID-19 thing. But luckily, they were able to open within the time span of their tickets. However, one of their daughters is autistic. And being autistic means that she really, really, really does not like the she does not like the mask. Sorry, folks, I'm looking something up real quick that I wanted to look up, but I didn't. And as a result, they went to Disney World, expecting that the cast members would be understanding and let their daughter in without a mask. And that did not happen. Disney World enforced the mask policy and turned the family away. So, here's the article from Inside the Magic. On August 6th, Richard Ross and his family arrived at the Walt Disney World Resort for a family vacation. Everyone was wearing masks except one, Ross's 7-year-old daughter who has autism. For the record, I have autism too. It's a much more mild case of it. I'm fairly high functioning, but this talking normal thing, I have a huge stutter, and I have to really practice. And there's certain traits in here that I recognize in me, and that's why I kind of want to talk about it. The Ross family was under the impression that Disney would still let their daughter in under a special exemption. Mistake number one. You should always verify things like that first. However, they learned this was not the case. According to a video that Ross recorded and later shared online, the conversation with a Walt Disney World cast member went like this. Can my daughter, who is autistic with sensory issues, enter your park without a mask because she medically can't wear a mask? Ross said. And the cast member responded, Sir, I apologize. I know you're frustrated. At this time we ask that everyone entering a park, and this is where Ross comes on, was like, just answer me the question. Are you refusing to follow the Americans with Disability Act laws? And as a person who is officially disabled, I'm going to have to say one thing. I get really tired of people using this law as an excuse, you have to bend over backwards to every demand. Sometimes the Americans with Disability Act does come into conflict with things of safety. And, you just cannot reasonably accommodate that. A guy who has, by the way, a metal heart, like an iron lung, he has to be pushed around in this big iron casket thing. That's a safety hazard for some locations, and even if the Americans with Disability Act says you have to make every reasonable accommodation you can for that person, you might not be able to do that. This is very similar, by the way. This accommodation might not necessarily be reasonable for the time being, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And the worker replies, hey, we're not talking about any of that right now. We're talking about and the audio couldn't be heard at this point, to come to the park. I think it was policies. If she comes to the park without a mask, we would refuse her entry regardless. Now, here's the thing about autistic people, and I have some authority to say this. We can be unreasonable sometimes. And there are things that bother us that do not bother other people. For example, I hate balloon noises. Balloon noises are the worst. They are so bad I can feel the nerves in my hands twitch. It's just really, really bad. And I just know that, like, I can't be around balloons. It sounds silly. Like, even as I speak it sounds silly. But when those things pop, it's almost paralyzingly painful. So I understand why a mask, especially for someone who might be a little less functioning on the autistic scale, could be a very, very big deal. Here's the thing, though. That doesn't matter when it's coming towards a pandemic. Like, here's the thing. Let's play up the situation a little bit. Let's say you have an autistic child, or a disabled child of any kind, really, and they have to climb every single tree they see, and if not, they're going to throw a hissy fit, and they're going to thrash and wail and cry and scream, and it's not even their fault. They just don't understand the concept of they can't climb the tree. They just want to climb the tree, and if you let them do that, they will be happy, because that is what their disability requires. Well, from the company's perspective, you can't climb that tree. If that person falls from the tree, they'll get hurt, and the company could get sued. So guess what? You know, their safety rules supersedes that kid's desire to climb the tree impulsively. It's a very similar thing with the masks. We are in a pandemic. You don't know if you are a asymptomatic carrier or not. Therefore, we wear masks and we keep social distancing. And you being disabled, like, is not a reason to not wear a mask. And by the way, I want to add, if you know you have health problems that prevent you from wearing a mask, maybe you shouldn't be going out when you have to wear masks, because everyone's doing it, and you know this is going to be a thing. And this family should have known that they were going to require masks. Like, if I were the family, I would have said very reasonably, like, hey, you know what? I know we said we'd go to Disneyland this year, but they're going to be requiring masks. Our daughter can't handle wearing a mask, so why don't we delay the trip for a year? Which, by the way, would be more fun in a year anyway, because Disneyland's operating at 1/3 of the capacity. Oh, look, it's the Rise of Resistance ride playing before me. Yeah, so that's what it is. It doesn't look that fun, but whatever. Anyway, got off topic there. So anyway, Disney at first did not respond to this, but they did release this statement. We are always focused on the health and safety of our cast members and guests. At all of our Disney stores, we have implemented a number of enhanced measures, including a face covering requirement. During these unprecedented times, we all have a shared responsibility to do our part. We regret the family was disappointed. Now, I have to say, this is the snarkiest response I've ever seen Disney give publicly. They're basically, this is like the closest you're going to hear Disney saying, tough luck. In fact, I loved the part where they say, during these unprecedented times, we all have a shared responsibility to do our part. That includes the family. And instead of saying like they made a mistake, they say, we regret the family was disappointed. Because, yeah, the family had several opportunities to probably change their plans. They should have known that this was going to be asked, but they went full ahead anyway, and then they wanted to pull this, are you going to deny the Americans with Disabilities Act? Remember, the Americans with Disabilities Act says you have to make a reasonable accommodation. Not wearing a mask during a pandemic is not a reasonable recommendation, and if your daughter can't wear one, you probably shouldn't be out and about. I have a couple other friends who, because of health issues, they can't wear masks, and as a result, they stay home. But hey, you know what? I have a solution for the family, and interestingly, I heard the family was from Pennsylvania, which is great for them because Sesame Place is actually the first and to date only theme park that's designated as an autistic center. these people know how to deal with autistic kids. And here's the thing, autistic kids love Sesame Place. So, here's the thing. I know it's not quite as magical as Disney, and for the record, I've never been to Sesame Place. I probably never will because I'm just too old for it now. But hey, they could save a bunch. They could have delayed their Disney vacation till next year and instead, as a supplement, go to the much, much cheaper Sesame Place, which probably would have had some protocols in place ready for the family with this special needs. But now I'm going to pass the question to you because, again, this is a sensitive topic. And I know people are definitely going to be conflicted about it, and I'm of two minds, obviously, because I do, again, as someone who officially is autistic, I understand some of those problems that you run into. At the same time, I'm also looking at it from Disney's perspective, and it's like they can't be reasonably expected to follow that request right now. They probably also wouldn't let someone in the park who doesn't smell like they've showered in 5 days because of what's going on. And, of course, just to top it all off, California has their first recorded case of the plague, and I don't know how many years. So, yay, California. We're doing great with the fires and everything. Anyway, I would love to know what all of you think about this. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. All right, that's the final topic. Let's see here. Let's see here. And Kevin says, dude, I live in New Jersey right next to New York. The governor is killing his state financially. New York is nearly broke. Yeah, I've heard about that too. So, Tony says, I got a solution. Well, I'd love to hear that solution. Ryan says, did you hear that over 50 Looney Tunes cartoons never released on DVD or Blu-ray were added to HBO Max yesterday with brand new HD restorations? I did not hear that, but I will probably be watching those once we end this live stream. Kevin says, my tax write-off should cover what I owe in taxes. I'm not concerned about paying taxes on the $600 per week. Thank God for tax write-off. I don't know if that's entirely how it works, but I'll let you figure that out. Hey, Crystal, how are you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. Welcome. You hit the very tail end of the show, unless you've been watching this whole time, in which case, yeah, feel free to comment on any of the topics. Water tastes so good during a heat wave. And hey, Tommy's here. She says, I know, I always miss you. Well, just to let you know, we typically go live around 2 to 2:30 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That's the schedule. Probably 2 to somewhere between 2 to 2:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's the show schedule. And all right, well, it seems like that is the end of, the comments we have. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. We'll see if the beanie returns on Friday. Again, the heat wave has to go down a little bit first. But, hey, anything that you want to comment on that you didn't get a chance to, well, comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. Flame responsibly, and I will see you all Friday.